I'm Pete Skamarok, co-founder and CEO of SkipFlag. We're a startup working in the enterprise space, and basically we turn conversations into knowledge. You can go to skipflag.com and sign up your Slack team and try it out. We're still waitlist, but coming out soon. So this panel is going to be about bots and AI, kind of that intersection. It's a hot area right now. And maybe by the end of it, we'll figure out the answer to Bradford Cross's question of whether bots are going to go bust in 2017. With that, I'll let my panelists introduce themselves.
Cool.
Oh, you don't need that.
Yeah. Hi, I'm David Hall. I'm a senior research scientist at Semantic Machines. We're in Berkeley and Boston. I co-founded it together with my PhD advisor, Dan Klein, and a number of other really excellent people, and we're building a next-generation conversational interface.
My name is Yishai Carmiel. I work at a company that is called Spoken. Spoken is a cloud infrastructure company that provides infrastructure for customer service. And as a result, my role in the company is analyzing all of these conversations that are happening on the infrastructure. So we are building very, very large system that can analyze millions of hours of conversation on a daily basis.
Hi, I'm Andrew Berger. I'm the CEO of Azumo, company here in San Francisco. And we help businesses create conversational interfaces to their products. So primarily helping companies create chatbots and voice bots connected to their existing products.
Hi everyone, I'm Dennis Yang. I'm one of the co-founders and chief product officer for Dashbot. This is my 20th year working in technology in San Francisco. What we do is we provide conversational analytics, or analytics for conversational interfaces, more commonly known as chatbots. And we most recently pushed over, processing 1.2 billion messages.
Hi everyone, I'm Sonal Gupta. I did my PhD at Stanford with Chris Manning. I graduated in 2015. Since then, I've been a researcher at Viv Labs. At Viv, we are building an intelligent virtual assistant. So think about Apple Siri or Cortana, so a user-facing assistant. And more importantly, we're also building a platform for third-party developers to teach Viv about stuff they want to get done at Viv.
That's great. So that leads into the first set of questions I wanted to talk about, which are about bots and learning. So how far are we, let me put this first one to David. Let's start over here. How far are we from bots that understand arbitrary natural language questions and can have a multi-turn dialogue with people? And can you say a little bit about what a multi-turn dialogue is?
Sure. So a multi-turn dialogue is a sort of what it sounds like, where you talk to a computer over a sequence of multiple utterances and sort of collaborate with the computer to figure out what it is that you would, what you'd like to get done. There's a lot of follow-up questions, things like that. And in terms of where I think things are going to go, I think that we're going to see a lot better support for multi-turn dialogues in the coming year or two. I think that there's going to be a very long time before we have strong AI or sort of strong natural language interfaces that understand absolutely everything you're going to say, especially dealing with common sense in the real world and stuff like that. But that you will be able to actually sort of get something done with a computer without having to sort of carefully phrase a command like you do today.
Yishai, what's your take? How far are we from multi-turn dialogue bots?
No, I agree with David. I think that most of the things that we are seeing today, these are really cool and nice stuff. But in terms of bots or some kind of a conversational AI system that can truly understand a human language to create some kind of multi-state dialogue system, we are really far away. It will take some time. There is some kind of a technology limitation with all the advantages in deep learning for speech and natural language processing. There has been a lot of progress, but there is still a lot of work needs to be done.
So now, what's your take after working with Chris Manning on dialogue and speech? What's your take on getting this to be practical?
So dialogue is a really, really hard problem, as we all know. And I feel we'll have some kind of system that would be useful in some ways within a year or two. Now, considering what's your expectation level, so if you want it to be like a human that will understand all your desires and constraints in whatever format you want to say it in. That's going to be a few years. I think it will be at least 5 to 10 years.
What about like interrogating? There are some interesting papers recently in the world of images where, was it Maluba, I think, I don't know if people saw that, startup was acquired by Microsoft. I think they were doing things where they would train, they'd have a set of humans ask questions about a picture, and then another set of humans answer those questions to train basically an oracle about a picture that then the AI could answer questions posed to it. Like, do you think, like in the near term, we'll be able to like have a document or an image, and Viv or something would be able to be interrogated about it?
Till we have the training data, I think generalization is still a big problem. So till we have some kind of training, it's in a similar domain. It can be spoken in different ways, but it has to know about it. It has to model the use case. I think we would be able to answer those questions. But if we just assume that the system would have some kind of common sense knowledge, that it should just know, understand things without even trained about it, then I think we are pretty far away from it.
So when you talk about training data, Andrew, is that really learning, or is that just memorization? So if we give a lot of examples of response pairs, is that really learning, or is it just like building a data set that we're pushing back on people?
And we've heard during the day examples around the systems, the games that we see on the screen. Is the line of code learning, or is it adapting to the data? So it is finally the data itself, like it was just mentioned, that the data is, if you have enough data, then to a human, the perception is that the system is capable of understanding. I define chatbots as 3 main components, and we're mixing some of those now, which is, the first is the NLU capability of understanding what the human or the user is telling the bot. Then there is some logic around what the bot can do. And finally, there's what's returned to the user, scripting, text. And so if I write 800 lines of response based on different configurations of NLU understanding, it might seem to be a system that can adapt. But finally, it was all scripted. Previously, it was trained for that.
So, and you're using some third-party platforms like Google and Amazon and other bot building platforms to actually build and deploy bots out to customers, is that right?
Yes, there are some commercially available platforms like IBM Watson, Microsoft Lewis, API.ai, and that's only for the understanding part of it.
So how well do those do with limited data, or do you need to pump in a lot of customer data to get good results?
I would say those research organizations are the most commercially mature offerings that can be found out there. They don't require a ton of training data to spit out a decent understanding, like a model that understands basically.
And Dennis, on that front of data, so you're one of the few organizations out there that's actually tapped into the mind of these bots. Can you say a little bit more about the kind of data you're collecting and what patterns you're seeing in the text?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a ton of data, and that's kind of what we find super exciting about sitting where we are is like we are seeing, frankly, like a lot of straightforward, simple bots right now. And kind of to answer your question before is in terms like I don't know how long it'll be until we see kind of true multi-turn conversations, but we're seeing kind of glimmers of hope where at the very least, a lot of bots are either responding to button pushes, which is a very simple conversation, or answering straightforward questions. But we're starting to see things like remembering your previous question, like saving state. So you don't have to just say, give me a black pair of jeans in size large. You can say, I want some jeans, and the bot responds, and then can remember that those are very kind of small glimmers of hope that people are even trying to think about these things. But I would also push back and say, in terms of the course of normal human conversation, we have a lot of simple conversations as well. And we start off with ordering off a menu, and that's very simple. Not necessarily multi-turn conversation, but it can be. And I think that's what's exciting is we have a billion or more people interfacing with this interface. So when it gets better, we don't have to tell them to use something else.
Yushay, on that point, I think you were talking about vertical versus generic bots that can answer any question. So when you talk about like actually putting a button with a specific text string on it, like that's a pretty customized bot, right?
Yeah.
That you're talking about. Like, can you say more about like, do you think vertical bots are going to be narrow use case bots are going to be winning, or broader God bots?
So this is a very good question. First of all, I'm talking about from the natural language understanding perspective, meaning, can we solve this problem from a research point of view, okay? Not from a rule-based perspective. One of the problems with, for example, Siri is that Siri is like a very generic bot, okay, a very generic personal assistant, and it cannot answer very complicated questions. For example, if I'm saying to Siri, hey Siri, I have a cell phone and I have a problem with my keypad, every second word that I type, it creates some kind of a problem, so Siri won't give me an answer for that. But the other hand, if I'm trying to be more specific for a bot specific, one of the problems that I can get more domain-specific data, train my system, maybe even create some kind of deep learning model, some kind of, let's call it a machine learning model that will solve it. But one of the problems from the business perspective is that can I scale it up? Can I create a lot of different type of use cases that that will generate me enough critical mass of generating actual business on top of that? And that's the real challenge.
So are customers willing to pay for this kind of thing right now? So you can take a bunch of data and turn it into an interface that they'll use?
So here's the thing, customers, it's a really simple question. The customer is thinking about this, thinking, okay, am I going to save money or am I going to make money out of it? Okay? It's customers, there are a lot of customers say, oh, I need to invest in AI, and there is a lot of hype about AI, but eventually, when you are talking with the business guys, and they are doing the officers, because of course the data scientists, they say, oh my God, I want this type of technology. These guys are making very tough business decisions, so they don't care about the technology behind it. Okay, you can put a small monkey that just answer the codes, and it will be okay. But eventually, if you are creating some kind of a solution that will give me some kind of a business opportunity, they will willing to pay for that.
So I think I mentioned vertical bots. One of the things that we've talked about on the bots podcast is God bots versus vertical bots. And by that, what we mean is if you're Google or Samsung or Microsoft, or you have the device, you have the OS that the bot that has a primary bot on it, like Siri, like Alexa. Sorry if this is recorded to everybody in the future who has an Alexa. Sorry, but not sorry. I find it kind of funny. Trigger people's Alexas. So anyway, if you have those devices, you're in a special position because your bot is the one that people get used to interacting with, right? So bot discovery is a very hard problem. And anybody building one of these specific customer, a vertical bot that I would use as an end consumer would have to know to install it. So I guess my question, Sonal, how do you think, you mentioned that you have a platform, so how do you see these other vertical bots coexisting with Viv?
So it's a platform, so developers can come to Viv and teach Viv whatever vertical they want to teach, right? Given it's user-facing, so it actually has to be useful to people and not very small specific people, right? So to broad audience that would use Viv. And in terms of very specific vertical bots, like business-focused, I think they can definitely coexist, all right? So I know Cortana has, some enterprise level things in which they are collaborating with companies, so develop enterprise level bots. And users are not gonna be using those ones. These are people who are actually maybe factory operators who want to operate their factory using a natural language interface. They would use that. So this is completely two different products. And they can completely coexist. In terms of user-facing chatbots, so let's assume you have a chatbot that just answers weather questions, right? Versus Apple Siri that can answer different questions. I think, I'm biased, but I think things that can answer more questions, you would talk more to them, right? Unless you start seeing errors in which you meant one thing, but it went to another, it thought that you're talking about hotels instead of weather for some reason, right? Because it has to make that decision at the global level of what exactly you're talking about. So unless you start seeing errors like that and you start getting irritated with it, then you might go to chatbots things, which are very specific, would answer to your requests, and you know the domain very well, you know what use cases they have, right? But given that if you're able to build something that is accurate enough, I think pressing a simple button on the phone is much easier than going to simple things.
We saw this play out in both the web and the mobile world, right? Like in the web, you had SEO, so you had like Google essentially is the Godbot that you mentioned. That shifted over to newsfeed optimization. And in the world where you're staring at your Alexa, I think kind of somehow teaching Alexa to optimize for your particular skill might be the next thing that we're looking for.
Okay, so there's going to be a bot race, kind of like
a
an SEO race.
BEO or something, yeah.
BEO?
Yeah, bot engine optimization. I don't know.
And also, and if I may, and also the delegation. We talked about Viv, Siri, Cortana, these main general purpose bots that might not be able to interact with all pieces of software, and they might need vertical or niche specific natural language interfaces where they can route specific requests and get those fulfilled by a vertical bot. But summon that vertical bot and return back to the human user with a confirmation of the task that has been requested.
The danger with having a sort of handing off an experience to another bot is that a lot of these systems have different levels of sophistication in terms of how much of natural language they can really understand. Can they understand pronouns? Can they understand referring expressions? And you could see a lot of sort of whiplash or something as you transition from one system to another. And so it does seem like you would at least want some kind of common language or common design patterns that show up again and again within language.
Well, so JSON is a common language pattern. So switching to English, there might be a discovery mechanism where both bots can define what language they're talking, might be able to understand what capabilities they have, and attempt to perform a transaction, potentially.
Yeah, I think it's a little difficult to sort of, declare that, you handle referring expressions while you handle pronouns, and then sort of, especially given that we don't even, like linguists don't even agree on like what exactly is going on with a lot of these things and what things are different concepts and what aren't.
From a practical standpoint, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that to the conversation that one thing with the current systems, having a multi-threaded dialogue with like Siri or Cortana or any of these systems is really, really hard, right? Both from the user perspective and from the system perspective. You don't know what exactly the system remembers about all of these different conversations, and the system has a huge problem knowing what exactly you're talking about and how they're connected to each other. So I think if people want to have a lot of, if it happens that in future, we realize that people want to have a lot of multi-threaded conversations and stuff, then you have to come up with some kind of solution that might be midway between them.
I mean, that's hard in real life too, right? Like
Right,
multi-threaded
yeah.
conversations.
Exactly. So I don't think it's a huge use case, but if it happens to be that way, that you're booking 5 things at one time, and then you want to go back to all of them.
Yeah.
Well, that's the power of AI and bots. So from the bot side, that it could be booking and coordinating. For example, there are X.AI and Microsoft has a meeting booking bot where it can know, it can have this godlike view to know everybody's schedule and come up with a better answer, and it can optimize. There's other,
Exactly.
yeah. So there is a promise of bots, I think, multi-threading better than humans. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a different point here, which is like, how do these bots coexist? So another point that was raised back on stage, we're still in the primitive stage of bots where they're almost like a reflex action. You hit your knee and your leg kicks. So I say, weather to a bot, and weather San Francisco, and it spits back the weather, right? But multi-turn dialogue is a little ways off. Similarly, if you have bots coordinating with other bots, they need to know, like, they'll need to have the contextual information that Google or Amazon would have. And so like that feels like a difficult question. Like if I ask a question, when's my meeting? It needs to know who you are, right? So like, David, have you thought about, you mentioned you worked on voice a bit. Like what do you think are the challenges with context in conversation?
There are many. Probably the biggest thing is actually, it's pretty easy to just hold on to everything they've ever said, and every, API query you've ever made, holding on to the results. The difficulty is in sort of figuring out when they say something, what they're actually referring to back in the conversation, and that takes a lot of training data and a lot of sort of sophisticated models in order to be able to handle that, especially because language is such a sort of fluid and flexible and sort of soft medium.
Yishay, you've been working with voice as well. Like, what do you think are the unique challenges? There's different types of bots here. I mean, there's a chat bot, which is a conversational text interface. Now they're enriched with graphical buttons, but there's also voice, which is, specifically the OS bots tend to use voice quite a bit. Can you say more about the challenges you've seen?
Yeah, so first of all, speech recognition over the past 5 years, has gone much, much better. Around, I can give you some numbers, around 75% better in the word error reduction since 2011. But one of the problems that people think, speech recognition is still an open problem. It's a very open problem because, for example, if I'm talking from a very close microphone, I'm talking just to my cell phone from very, very close, the recognition is quite good. But if I'm talking in a very noisy environment or I want to put a microphone that will try to transcribe what I'm saying in that room, the recognition collapses. And when we are thinking about conversational interface, so 2 problems. First of all, the speech recognition adds some propagated error to the textual information. And that is why one of the problems when we are trying to think about can I integrate with Amazon Alexa or with Google Now, one of the problems is that they are just giving you the best hypothesis, meaning what is the best answer that Alexa is thinking you have said. And this is not good enough, usually when you are trying to think about. And also if you're thinking about languages, if we are trying to create some kind of a chatbot, creating a chatbot, in English or in Spanish or in Chinese, it's really easy because you have a lot of, data over the web. And also, and, the transfer learning is much easier than in speech. So just as a reference, right now there are 7,000 languages in the world. Google supports around 80 languages. So we are talking about, just more than 1% of the world languages that we have.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think Berkeley actually had to take down a bunch of their course material because it wasn't available in other, the audio hadn't been transcribed. So this is another problem is like text-to-speech, if you're impaired, if you're hearing impaired, if you're spending all this energy as a company building a voice bot, how does that work for the hearing impaired, right? So there's a lot of interface difficulties that you have to think about when you're building these things. So you're building these for companies now, right?
Correct.
Can you say more, like, what are the types of things? I kind of want to lead towards this question of, will bots go bust? So a big question is, are people paying for these things, right?
Correct, yes.
So are they?
And so what you can see is similar to the web in the 90s, mobility in the 2000s. Companies, some have expertise in-house where they have DS guys, language experts, scripters, writers, and some others might not. And so that's when a services organization can step in and assist. Definitely, similar to how companies 10 years ago, they contracted to create mobile applications. They need to enhance their software products and have interfaces for conversational features. And the device, the channel, gets diluted. It could be on the desktop, it can be on web, it can be on the mobile phone, even specific devices, like you said, Alexa or Google Home, that are controlled by the tech giants.
So you're bullish on conversational interfaces?
I would say, Pete, it's the same as we've seen in the last couple of decades. Web appeared, and we start to see users having a facility to access information and transactions on the web. Then the facility of going to mobile devices, having your phone with you 24/7, and you know the statistics. It's the first thing you check when you wake up, the last thing you turn off. and from there trying to solve transactions and get information through the mobile phone. We're now having a conversation with natural language, so it comes to us humans naturally to be able to interact with software in natural language. It could be text or it could be voice. And so yes, we're bullish on voice and conversational interfaces. Going forward, they'll have different formats for different software products.
I see you nodding a lot, Dennis. Like you're seeing some real data. Like, what are you seeing? Repeat engagement.
We're continuing to see more users interact with our bots than the previous month. Every month on month, we're seeing more and more people having longer conversations with all of our customers. Granted, we're growing as well as a company as people discover us. But what's encouraging is that to see how many people are actually continuing to speak with these bots and have these interfaces. And unlike 20 years ago when I first started doing web, there's a lot more people that you can access now that are available through Facebook, through Kik, Line, Slack, Alexa, Google Home. Like these devices are ever present, and I think that's no small feat. That an opportunity, right?
To make it more concrete, like what are some examples of bots you've seen that seem to get some engagement or repeat engagement?
Yeah, I mean, some of the bots right now that we're seeing are, frankly, very, very straightforward domain-specific bots. Like the weather bots we're seeing, it's a very, very simple thing. There's kind of there's some bots like Swelly is kind of a hot or not bot, which is a very simple, but very engaging experience for a lot of their users. And I think those are some of the early successes we're seeing in the space. And then I'm also, I love the Uniqlo bot. You can actually have a conversation with it and shop their entire product catalog through a conversational interface. But there's definitely people running experiments and playing with things. I'm super excited. It's like when MIT put their coffee pot online, right?
They put their coffee pot online as a bot?
That was from the web days,
oh,
right?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
the old MIT coffee pot. There's fun things like that, in the bot world.
I think
you're seeing adoption.
I think to kids who are going to grow up in the next 10 years, this is going to become the default thing. I see my nephew and niece, they're hooked onto their Alexa, even though half of the time they doesn't really understand them because they're still learning to speak. But they are so used to just talking to a device that I could have never imagined before.
Yeah, I mean, conversation is the first interface that we learn as humans, right? So to have the ability to interface information with this very natural interface is super exciting. And we as technologists are very fluent in SQL and typing. And I think more of our world's population will be more familiar with accessing information in this way. And that's exciting to me.
How many people out there in the audience, the show of hands, are working on conversational interfaces or bots in some form? Okay, that's 20%, 30%, okay. So it might be good to turn this over to the audience and get some audience questions.
Okay. Question?
Yeah, Yeah, so I think a lot of the talk you guys have given, it's actually a lot, I feel like it's a lot more towards the consumer side. I just wanted to hear how you guys feel about the enterprise level, how bots can be applicable there.
Well, I mean, we have Salesforce sponsoring the conference with their Einstein product. You can see how that is a conversational interface to a ton of ML and training on the back. But I think that's one example of a business conversational interface in corporate.
David, you had some thoughts on enterprise versus consumer.
Sure. So, customer service is a very big expense for many companies, and we already see a very high rate of automation in these systems and a lot of dissatisfaction with the current systems. But there's such a cost-saving measure that people still invest in them. And so I believe that as we sort of make sort of more fluent dialogue systems more available and more effective, that we will actually see a lot of uptake in that area, replacing sort of this more typical IVR systems that you get when you call your bank.
Hi, I was hoping the panel could address the question of bots and conversational interfaces, voice interfaces in automobiles. I mean, these things are already rolling computers, and more we're going to be tasked less with driving them and more with figuring out what to do while we're sitting in the car while it drives.
So,
Yeah, feel free. I mean, I think voice is the right interface for a context where the user doesn't have availability to tap or click on the device. And I think that skill keeps on growing with new generations of because I'm so excited to see the tech giants opening up their car platforms as well to create ecosystems and orchestrating these ecosystems around content, functionality, application, at a level approved by the automakers and at a level approved by the orchestrator. And so CarPlay, Android Auto, and others combined with voice interfaces, I think are great.
Will it be the car though, or will it just be the phone that's on your dash?
well,
Either one, right? I mean, I think it's a fun mental exercise to kind of wonder if the voice interfaces will beat the self-driving interfaces, right? So, like which one's going to win out, right? Because at the point at which they're fully autonomous vehicles, we don't necessarily need voice to hold our attention anymore.
Sounds like you are.
yeah, because I've been doing voice interface for automobiles, so I know some of these problems. First of all, the problem with the automobile that it's a noisy environment, okay? And you have what we call, you have a lot of noise coming from the other side, from the motor, okay? So it's, as I said, there is a challenge in terms of the voice interface, okay? Because it's not, a very clean environment. And it also, it has a lot of challenges from the acoustic perspective because you are talking in some kind of, a closed acoustical thing. So it's really promising. You need to think about the use cases, okay? As for the mobile or as for, if you are going to put a microphone, it's from the technical perspective, you need to have a microphone. Either it's, either the processing is being done on the mobile phone or either in the car. It's not really important. The main challenge is the speech recognition stuff.
Cool. We probably have time for one more question here. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I'll just turn it back over to you.
Yeah. Okay. This has been really interesting. I think the jury's still out. It sounds like the consensus, at least backstage, was that bots, the AI behind bots is not going anywhere. And conversational interfaces, it feels like a natural way to interact. And so we're going to keep doing that. Maybe like closing thoughts. We've got another few minutes here to wrap up. You each want to give like a 30-second take?
Sure. So I think that where these interfaces are ultimately going to show their real value is in problem solving and dealing with things that are not better served by GUIs. And that sort of long-term, you'll see these systems as an augmentation on top of GUIs, except it may be the case of like automobiles, where, yeah, there's a limit to how much you can put on the HUD. And so I think that that's going to be where these systems get really interesting, is when they're able to reason about multiple constraints and orchestrate sort of multiple tasks across multiple domains to help you sort of get things done without you having to think through the steps yourself very carefully.
What about you, Yishay? What do you think?
I think well, I've been working on conversational AI for the past 16 years, so of course I'm really in favor of, this stuff will catch up sometime. Because of, the past 5 years that the technology has been evolving, there is a strong promise about it. I think that in terms of the use cases, we need to solve real-world problems and to show the customers or the enterprise customers or the end users how do I make their life better. So we need to concentrate on the use cases that are really promising and not just very simple use cases.
Do you think enterprise over consumer in the near term?
Well, if you're talking about a startup company, so a startup company, of course, you need to generate revenues or a set of customers. I think that enterprise is more promising, because from a startup company, if you're talking about a B2C, you need to create a very large set of users, which might be difficult, because you have a lot of competition from the big guys.
My thoughts, if you work on a software product, then the process of defining the 1 or 2 features that are best served by a conversational interface, that's the main exercise. to come up with the top 1 or 2 features that allow your users to engage further with the product. I would recommend that small exercise as a means to starting to get into the conversational space.
Yeah, I guess kind of what Andrew was mentioning earlier, as we move from web to mobile, and now with so many people interfacing with these platforms now, the opportunity is that when you have a ubiquitous interface that is more accessible to more of the world's population, that kind of a little more convenience, a little more ease in usage is going to result in huge effects that affect billions of people. So that's fun.
Yeah, I think conversation interface is going to be the future, and very, very soon we are not going to have the talk about whether it's going to go bust or it's going to succeed. It will become more useful. We'll keep increasing our expectations. So AI would never be solved, right? If it can perform something now, we'll always have the expectation that it will perform something else tomorrow. So we'll have to keep improving the system, keep teaching the system how to perform different tasks. And it has to be a system that can be taught very well by the users as well. So it can learn from users what do they prefer and perform tasks in the future.
Great. Well, let's give our panel a hand. Thank you all.
Thank you.